Good afternoon, Michael Malice here. Let that be your welcome for the next hour. Guys, you're in for a real treat. We have the co-founder of Wikipedia, the guy who coined the term, Larry Sanger. Larry, you've been on a tear recently about the issues with Wikipedia. You've called it as beyond repair. You recently took a page from Martin Luther's book and put your theses about what's wrong with the site. Before we get started, I'll tell you my personal issues with that have affected me in my life personally. First of all, it currently says right now that I am a Fox News contributor on my Wikipedia. I am not and have never been a Fox News contributor. This is a paid position. And it would be very easy for someone looking at that to be like, oh, you're saying this because you work at Fox News, which would be a fair criticism. It's not the case. That's a very easy one. Another one was, and people watch the show know, for years it said on the show that my dad worked at Goldman Sachs. And when you follow the link, there was a hyperlink, citation needed, right? The citation was an interview I did on Rogan talking about how I worked at Goldman Sachs. So it's not even ambiguous. And people came at me for a long time. Oh, your dad's funding the Ukraine war. You come from money. He worked at Merrill Lynch. He was a systems analyst. I don't even know what that is. The only reason I know the term is because on The Simpsons, when they did, what jobs the kids would get as growing up, Martin the nerd was sitting there going, systems analyst, systems analyst, systems analyst. And he got systems analyst and he's all excited. So those are a few little ones. I'll tell you a very funny one because it's just exciting to be able to tell you this story. My second favorite author is, second favorite public speaker rather, is Fran Lebowitz. She's been a New Yorker for many years. She wrote 2 books, one in the 70s, one in the 80s. And on her Wikipedia, it said that during the 70s, she ghost wrote a gay porno novel. So I'm like, all right, I'm going to track this book down. I tracked it down. It was not easy. There's not that many copies floating around. And due to my OCD, if I own a book, I will read it. So I read it. And she came here to Austin, and I was so excited. And this woman doesn't have a cell phone, a computer, or a typewriter. She's a huge Luddite, very famously. And I go up to her. I'm all proud. I'm like, hey, am I the first person to ask you about this? And she goes, you're the second. I didn't write this. And I go, what do you mean? I go, it's on your Wikipedia. And you know what she did? Fran Lebowitz, who does not have a computer or cell phone, laughed in my face because even she knew how stupid it was of me to use Wikipedia as a source. So, right? She signed it. House of Leather. It was quite the read. There was a good plot. Is he going to escape the House of Leather? I'm not going to spoil it. There's like one copy for $1,000 on the internet. I didn't pay that much. Point being, people understand that Wikipedia is extremely flawed, and yet they still rely on it. So this disconnect is, to me, extremely troubling, especially as more and more people are outsourcing their thinking to things like that. So I would let you have the floor because you, I'm sure, have a lot of thoughts on this issue.
People are using AI in the same way now, too. Thinking is hard, of course. I know this because, I used to teach thinking as a college philosophy instructor, and the freshmen are just really resentful of you making them actually figure out what they believe about difficult questions, and it's annoying. So we basically offload that responsibility to things that are at least proxies for authority and reliability. We hope that Wikipedia is right about this. It's right about most stuff.
Or mostly right.
Yeah, and it's the same way with chatbots. So I'm not really sure what you want me to tell you there, other than that it is obviously, especially today, if it matters, you have to check your sources and not just check that Wikipedia claims that there is a source, but it's actually important that you actually check the source itself. I mean, I myself, when I'm doing research, I write about theology now, and it'll give me direct quotes of some old, ancient theologian, and I won't trust it. I'll click on the link. I'll actually find the text itself on the page, and if I'm not sure about that, about the translation or whatever, I'll look up another one. And unfortunately, that takes a lot of effort, as I say, and we are lazy. So this is not to say anything about the bias or the reasons why Wikipedia has the problems that it does, but more to point the finger at us, and that's a good way to begin, I think, to acknowledge that we actually bear a lot of responsibility.
Well, I don't know about we, but let me ask you this. You were there at the very beginning. So can you please tell people what the vision was and how it kind of started going off the rails from your personal perspective?
So the original vision, I'll actually first tell you the assignment that Jimmy Wales gave me, right? So it was my job to start Newpedia. And then in the process of starting Newpedia, I started Wikipedia. So this was my job. Jimmy Wales was managing many other things for Bomis, which is the parent company. But he gave me instructions. So the instructions were, this should be a free encyclopedia that anyone can contribute to, generally speaking, but we want it to be credible. That was certainly one of the requirements. And so we'll find, experts and motivate them in various ways. I was told to read a lot of the theory behind open source software. So I was told to read The Cathedral and the Bazaar, which you can look up. It's actually pretty important for internet history, by Eric Raymond, who I follow on X, who is still like holding forth there. And very good essay and good book that he developed it into. And it basically argued that when people work together online to build good software, they actually can produce, under the right circumstances, if they're organized in the right way, they can produce really great stuff. And so the idea then was, we would take the concept behind open source software and apply it to building an encyclopedia. So that was the very basic idea. And then my notion of it was, Wikipedia was going to be ultimately enormous. I wanted it to be really big. I wanted it to be very detailed. I wanted the articles, actually, unlike is the case now, I wanted them to be checked by experts. Now, this does not necessarily mean that they had to be approved by experts before they were posted online, but I wanted them eventually to be checked by expert, and they'd get a little green check mark if they had been peer reviewed by someone. And I also wanted the end result to be, of course, open source. I've already mentioned that. And maybe as far as like the theoretical ideals go, the most important is neutrality. So Newpedia began with this policy on lack of bias, as we called it, and that became NPOV, neutral point of view, on Wikipedia. So the neutrality policy, in a nutshell, is, if you can identify a point of controversy in an article, then it should be impossible to tell whether or what side of the controversy the authors of the article are on. So that's the rule of thumb. Wikipedia does not live up to that now, in my opinion. So that was the idea.
Okay.
And I think it got about, I would say, halfway there. It got huge, that's for sure, but it wasn't very reliable. It was full of a lot of useful facts, that's true, And it does have a lot of expert sourced information. It's not approved in any way by experts. And now, rather than being quite neutral and being a nice, fair representation of the broad range of opinion from all around the world, which is the real goal of neutrality, it's Wikipedia tends to express what I would describe as the establishment point of view, not the neutral point of view. How and or rather when that really started happening, I mean, I think you can trace it back to events in the very first year of the project, in the first couple of years. The first time when an article actually uh, took a particular side on a culture war issue that I can remember was the article about global warming in 2005, when it simply said in Wikipedia's own voice that global warming was a fact and that it was created by human activity, by dumping carbon in the atmosphere. Um, by 2010, 2012, as I have been saying, and I think this is right, Wikipedia resembled in sort of tone and outlook the BBC, the New York Times, that kind of thing, which at that time was already quite biased, but it wasn't as biased as something like MSNBC or Fox News. But then in 2016, that's when I put it down to basically during the Trump's first election season and Brexit. Basically, the word went out apparently to the media properties, or in the West at least, that they were all to start opinionizing and telling people what to think in ways that they had never done before. And Wikipedia followed suit. So Wikipedia became not just biased on one side, it actually, in 2018, codified a list of unapproved sources from and basically most conservative sources are not allowed. You can look that up on Wikipedia on the so-called perennial sources page. So it's a list of sources that are essentially allowed and not allowed. It's all color coded. So and I don't think things have gotten much better since then. I don't think they've gotten a lot worse in the last 5 years, but I don't think they've gotten a lot better. Wikipedia continues to basically reliably mouth whatever the Wikipedians think is the, as I would say, the establishment point of view.
Folks, you might know that workwear is the thing in menswear and has been for a few years. It's really hard to make good shoes or boots that you can wear on the street or you can wear in the field, but Brunt has nailed it because they sent me a pair of their work boots and I wear them all the time. Choosing work boots used to mean sacrificing comfort or durability. They either look nice or they're durable. With Brunt, you get both. The co-founder grew up blue collar. He started Brunt Workwear after his friends in the trades kept telling him the big brands stopped listening, haven't changed in 100 years. They sold out to become fashion brands. Brunt are the most comfortable work boots you'll ever wear. They feel comfortable right out of the box. That's true. I can attest to this. No long, painful break-in like all those other brands. They're not just comfortable. They're built to perform. Waterproof, safety toe, soft toe, lace up, pull on. They've got options that can handle whatever job site you're walking into or whatever office you're walking into. Brunt stands behind what they make. You can wear them to work. If they're not right for you, send them back. No other brand does that. For a limited time, you get $10 off at Brunt when you use code Malice at checkout. Just head to bruntworkwear.com, use code Malice, and you're good to go. Brunt was tired of the workwear brands out there cutting corners. You work too hard to be stuck in uncomfortable boots that don't hold up. So they built something better, boots that are insanely comfortable and built for any job site for a limited time. $10 off at Brunt when you use code Malice at checkout. just head over to bruntworkwear.com and use code Malice. And after you order, they'll ask what you heard about Brunt. Tell them Michael Malice sent you. Get back to work. Let's get back to the show. But let me play a little bit devil's advocate. As you yourself said, Fox News, and there's nothing wrong with this, presents a conservative perspective, right? It's a curated network. Nothing wrong with that. I would go on Fox News all the time. But is there a right of center or even centrist equivalent to the New York Times in terms of being authoritative?
I would say last I saw, the Christian Science Monitor was pretty close to that.
Sure.
USA Today is still maybe slightly left of center, but not as bad. Something like that, I suppose. Maybe some of the local newspapers.
But what I'm saying is, I'm sure Christian Science Monitor is whitelisted on Wikipedia as a source.
Oh yeah, I'm pretty sure it's green listed.
Yeah, there's whatever the top approval rating is. My point being, isn't part of this bias, which I'm not disputing in the slightest, is not also a function of the level of status and stature these left-wing publications have in our culture?
A level of stature among the left in particular. But yes, I would say the Federalist has a considerable stature among conservatives, but it's blacklisted.
I don't think the Federalist does. I'm friends with the Federalist. Molly, I was the one who convinced Molly Hemingway that Trump would be a good president. So that was on me. I'm friends with them. I'm friends with the whole team over there. But they're not. They don't occupy the same position as the Times do. They don't do original reporting. They're not
no, I wouldn't say that. That's true. That's true. But I mean, there's a lot of stuff that is not as high ranking as the New York Times that is entirely green listed. I do think that it has a lot to do with simply a matter of the amount of prestige that
Yep.
so I would agree with that, but it's just that prestige is to a very great extent determined by what is cited and respected in the halls of Congress and other bastions of the establishment. So I don't think that what you're saying is inconsistent with my point, really.
Oh, I'm not saying it's inconsistent at all. I'm just saying I think it's not just entirely a function of bias. It's also a function. Yeah, right.
That's right. No, I agree with that. I mean, you can argue, for example, that the Wall Street Journal and the Telegraph are lean slightly right, but yes, they're they are relative exceptions, and they're still extremely establishment.
Yes,
that's actually the point. So, and National Review, for example, that's quite conservative.
Oh yeah.
It's entirely greenlit. Of course, that generally means that when you're talking about an opinion source, you have to attribute the opinions to their source. But that's the general rule, regardless. Nevertheless, it's greenlit. I think it does have a lot to do with the fact that the Overton window is very, very carefully respected at the National Review.
Yes.
And when Trump began to play havoc with that, actually giving voice to things that were outside of the Overton window, that really created this opportunity for new kinds of media, which also pushed the envelope and also tended to make the establishment, both left and right, kind of freak out and think that half of the American public now are just consumers of misinformation. Um, I think that certainly the media landscape changed, but that is no excuse to try to not respect the change of the media landscape. If the requirements of neutrality have changed, then um, well, Wikipedia should change with them, I suppose. Not the requirements, not the definition of neutrality, but what is permitted, so to speak. Yeah.
So I would make a slight correction, which I'm confident you'll agree with, which
Okay.
is that it's not that the National Review works within the Overton window; it's that it regards its role as to maintain the Overton window, very kind of explicitly since Buckley is from the beginning.
Beautifully stated. Yes,
Yeah, I
I
think
agree.
we're on the same page there entirely. Are you?
Yes.
In fact, as you were talking, I wanted to pull up something, and I was typing, and it was a National Review article. And the question I have for you is: are you familiar with Robert Conquest's three laws of politics?
I am. I couldn't tell you what they are off the top of my head, but
That's why I
sure.
looked. That's why I looked it up while you were talking, because Robert Conquest was a prominent, hardcore anti anti-Soviet communist. He wrote several books. One called The Great Terror, which I used as a major resource for my book, The White Pill, which appears over my shoulder. And his three laws of politics are: the first one is not really relevant here. I'll do the first and third first. First is everyone is conservative about what he knows best, and the third is the behavior of any bureaucratic organization can be best understood by assuming it is controlled by a secret cabal of its enemies, which is humorous. But the second one I think is key here, because his second law of politics is any organization not explicitly and constitutionally right wing will sooner or later become left wing. And I think I can't speak for him, but how I would interpret that is progressivism, from its start as this kind of messianic Christianity that Woodrow Wilson, injected directly into America's bloodstream, and even earlier with that, William Jennings Bryan, is this idea of you have to proselytize everywhere on earth and to every aspect of culture. There is no place that is outside the purview of the progressive ethos. Even if you're having a video game in the Middle Ages, we have to make it be diverse. It doesn't matter if it doesn't make any sense. If you're anti-racist baby, you got to teach your baby not to be racist. Nothing is outside its purview. So in that, and people on the right are raising their families. They're taking their jobs. They're not thinking in those terms. So there's an enormous asymmetry in how these ideas, I don't mean left of center ideas, I mean specifically progressive ideas, progressivism is spread. Don't you think in that sense, speaking to Conquest Law, what happened to Wikipedia is largely inevitable?
Um, yeah, I've given this quite a bit of thought, not necessarily in terms of Conquest's law, although it is often applied to Wikipedia. It's interesting that you would say that you would trace it back to like Woodrow Wilson and early American evangelism and that sort of thing. No, I mean early progressivism, like of the Teddy Roosevelt variety. Yeah, I mean he was a hardcore Episcopalian, and he took his religion actually very seriously and his principles and the whole there was a real idealistic streak to him there, and um, I think that modern like new left progressivism is not animated by that at all
Oh,
and
I'm
has
sorry. Let me correct myself. It's not animated by that, but it's animated in the sense of the need to proselytize and control. So they got rid of all the
oh,
morality, they got rid of the faith, but the mode and the mindset has remained universalist and totalitarian.
yeah. No, I agree, um, and obviously, well, I think what I typically say here is that um, the the left immediately spotted Wikipedia as a new kind of institution.
Yep.
And as an institution, it was eminently capturable because it was open,
Yep.
and already had a lot of the sort of idealism and so forth. And indeed, there was no strong commitment to conservatism as such. I think there is um, a liberty loving aspect of neutrality. Neutrality supports people in um, their search for autonomy in the world. Um, in fact, you can't really learn everything that you need to if you don't have textbooks
Right.
and journalism and so forth that is truly neutral, that covers the range of views. Otherwise, you're being manipulated. Um, so, nevertheless, it as much as Jimmy Wales and other of the old timers like to say that uh, neutrality is one of the 5 pillars of Wikipedia. It really isn't. It's basically gone the way of the dodo. It no longer is functional. They can claim that it is, but it's not. They have basically stacked the deck against a whole lot of things that they don't like. So now Wikipedia doesn't have a neutral point of view. It has a GASP point of view, which is a globalist, academic, secular, and progressive.
Mm-hmm.
GASP. And I'm not saying that, for example, there's something wrong with being academic, right? Or globalist, at least in a better sense. But the problem is that in the mouth of Wikipedia, basically academic standards now are those that conform to only particular kinds of theories found in the academy. So yeah, I agree. I think that Wikipedia is one of the institutions that the left has marched through
Right.
and captured, and it was, in hindsight, it was inevitable. If we had thought harder about it back when Jimmy Wales was a libertarian rather than a Labor Party voter, perhaps the rules would have been different.
Well, I mean, I've thought about this as well, and I wonder if what you're saying is something that sounds nice but is impossible in practice. And let me give you an example. If let's talk about something the transgender, talking about if I read this article, I can't tell, what side the author is on, right? And that's something I think is extremely admirable. Not disputing at all that that's something that's a goal.
You can't tell what?
That if I'm reading an article, what side the author is on, like that's the
Oh,
goal, like
yes.
a neutral point of view.
Yes.
But we are at a point. I when I was doing my book on North Korea, when the dear leader Kim Il Sung met the president of South Korea after decades of separation, he realized they couldn't understand each other. It was like 60% or whatever, 80%, I remember a number of their language had been different from each other. Increasingly, people on the left, on the right are using literally different verbiage. So if I'm writing an article about, let's suppose, transgenderism, if I'm referring to she or a transgender woman or he, a transgender identified male, right away I know what side of the article, the fence the author is on. If I talk about tax hikes or revenue increases, I immediately know what side of the aisle the author is on. There are infinite examples where people can think of how things, and here's something that the corporate press uses constantly. So just like in a play, you have at the beginning of the play the cast of characters. Mercutio, Romeo's hot-headed friend, right? So right away when he appears on the stage, I know exactly who he is, right? So what journalists do right away, if I have an article about Joe Rogan, it'll say Joe Rogan, comma, who has a history of transphobic jokes, comma. So I'm telling the reader, now that's factual in a sense, but no one, without a bias would say, name one thing about, if you're playing Family Feud, name one thing about Joe Rogan, podcast host, fear factor. Oh, history of transphobic jokes, right? But that journalist, subtly or not so subtly, is telling the audience, this is the prism through which you should perceive Joe Rogan, right?
Yes.
So my point is, what you're discussing, it seems almost impossible, because how any article is framed is going to reveal, especially in our bifurcated times, the author's perspective.
Right. The thing is, Wikipedia is supposed to be multi-authored. It is supposed to be a collaborative work. And again, it is supposed to explicitly permit and encourage a wide variety of views so that people who use language in radically different ways and want to frame a character like Joe Rogan in a particular way have to negotiate with other people who want to frame him in a different way. In the first few years of the site, there was a real, often good faith effort at bringing a lot of different views to the table, actually allowing negotiation. Didn't always work. And sometimes there would be people who would just squat on a page. And now it's that way throughout the entire website. And this is why we can say that Wikipedia is, in fact, biased now. I think so. So if the question is, was it always going to be, was it inevitable? I think, given the nature of the platform and the initial ground rules that we started with, perhaps, but 2020 hindsight and all that, we wouldn't have known what the better rule set would have been. But if we had started with sounder rules, I think it might have been possible to basically shut down what used to be called the POV pushers.
Sure.
Point of view pushers. And I think it would have been possible. But the thing is, and I have to say, I mean, I'm remembering back 25 years here, 24 years. I remember thinking, it actually is hard, I thought to myself, to simply tell another person you're being biased.
Right.
You are you're pushing a certain point of view too hard. And at a certain point, I actually remember telling the community at large, one of the consequences of neutrality as a policy, it means you actually have to actively write for the other side yourself. You can't just tolerate other people writing for the other side. You have to do it yourself. Otherwise, it won't work. Otherwise, it will end up being a constant a struggle, and ultimately will end up with what we have ended up with. So this is why I have made the second of the 9 theses to enable competing articles. So the idea is people who take different views of controversial issues can aim at neutrality, but a lot of times their differences are so profound that even when they make their best faith effort at neutrality, their perspective colors what emerges. Like, if you ask a group of Hindus to write a really neutral article about God, to change the example, then it's going to look very different from a bunch of Americans writing an article about God, and that will be a reflection of the culture of the perspective. So the whole idea then is, Wikipedia approves only one very narrow perspective. Now, it is a very high prestige perspective for sure. I mean, the people who take this perspective are trained at top universities, and the conclusions they arrive at and the sources they use are the ones that are associated with lots and lots of money in like the power centers of the West. Nevertheless, there are also entirely separate traditions, which are in some cases ancient, or at least they're reasonably distinguished, associated with India and China and maybe Japan, right? And those people are perfectly capable of writing good encyclopedia articles, even in English, and it would be interesting to read them. So why not allow them to write articles from their perspectives? Again, you would say, okay, you are committed to our neutrality policy. Nevertheless, you can set the ground rules in the way that the current Wikipedians have set the ground rules, which tend to favor the GASP perspective.
Guys, early this year, I went on a bulk, and I want to thank all the lovely fans out there for pointing out how fat and disgusting I look and how I look like shit. But now I'm leaning back out, and if you want to see how I look like lean, well, that's where sheath underwear comes in. So the first time I put on sheath underwear, this is way back in the Gas Digital days, I'm like, what the F is this crap? Because it's underwear with two pouches. Patented dual pouch technology, one part for one part of your male anatomy, one part for another part of your male anatomy. And you're putting your boys in there, you're like, I don't know about this. And I have worn sheath every single day since then. It's the only underwear I wear because it is so damn comfortable. And try it out. At first, you'll be like, okay, Malice is crazy. No one's disputing that. But I'm not wrong that sheath is the most comfortable underwear you're ever going to wear in your life. And I got to tell you, there's something really fun about being on an interview, being on a date, and knowing your underwear is grabbing your junk in two different ways. And you're sitting there like totally normally, but you're thinking to yourself, if only they knew. Well, you know right now that I'm wearing sheath all the time, even in the shower. No, okay, not in the shower. I don't shower. So if you go to sheathunderwear.com, use promo code Malice, you get 20% off. They also have cool t-shirts. I wear the t-shirts to the gym. They've got new materials like bamboo. It sounds crazy, but it's actually softer than other stuff. Go to sheathunderwear.com, use promo code Malice. You get 20% off your order, and you'll see why it is something I have worn every day for years. Thank you, Sheath, for being such a longtime sponsor and having me in your ads. Folks, if you're worried about the safety of your home, you need to hear about Simply Safe's early access Black Friday sale. Is your home actually safe if you have old school home security? If you could actually stop someone from breaking into your house before they got inside, wouldn't you want to? Now there's a way where you could stop someone from entering your house. I don't mean the guests you don't want, like Tom Woods. I mean burglars. Traditional security systems respond after someone breaks in. Simply Safe is different because it stops crimes before they happen with its Active Guard outdoor protection. Their AI-powered cameras detect threats while they're still outside your home, and they alert real security agents. That's the difference. The agents take action while the intruder is still outside. They confront the intruder. They let them know they're being watched on camera and that police are on their way. They can even sound a loud siren and trigger a spotlight if needed. This is how you stop a crime before it starts. I've watched a lot of those videos where there's porch pirates, and as soon as like someone starts talking to them, they freak out. It's really, really fun. Hopefully the worst thing that ever happens is someone approaches your door and doesn't actually try to break in, because oof, this is why I'm no longer in New York. Other systems have cameras that let you talk to intruders, but they require you to see the alert yourself. Now, Simply Safe's monitoring agents have your back. They talk to the intruders even if you aren't there. There are no long-term contracts. There are no hidden fees. You can cancel anytime. Simply Safe has been named the best home security system by U.S. News and World Report for 5 years running. 60-day money-back guarantee. Try it and see the difference for yourself. All you have to do is go to simplysafe.com/malice, SIMPLISAFE/malice, and you can save 60% on any new system. That's their biggest deal of the year. There will never be a better time to get real security for your home. That's simplysafe.com/malice, SIMPLISAFE/malice. Let's get back to the show. I think another issue, and I would love to hear your thoughts. I don't think most leftists think of themselves as leftists, or they would if you push them. They think of themselves as normal or having common sense. They swim in circles where everyone is within a certain standard deviation of their views. My friend, okay, he's for socialized healthcare. I like Obamacare. Maybe we should tweak it. But this idea that, like, private healthcare, anything like that, that's crazy talk. And they're not even incorrect, because the idea that America is going to privatize the healthcare system anytime soon is crazy. It's not happening. So they can kind of be validated in their perspective. All the channels they watch, all the articles they consume, even National Review, to do the, I guess, the right of that bell curve, is within this consensus of certain norms and even a way of attaining knowledge and truths. So they don't think, oh, it's a left wing bias. This is what everyone who's normal thinks, is what they would say. So it's almost impossible for them to kind of separate the wheat from the chaff. This is data, and this is my perspective on that data.
Yes, and well, of course, they can't sense the temperature of the water that they swim
Right.
in,
That's right. Yeah.
or another metaphor would be that they operate in an echo chamber, and so of course they don't hear any other voices. And certainly a very important aspect of this is that since 2016, especially, there has been a demonization of any voices that are contrary to whatever the establishment declares as the preferred view. So anything, any suggestion that there was a lab leak origin of COVID was just demonized in the mainstream media, and therefore it was demonized in Wikipedia, and it continues to be there. They are basically the establishment lapdogs at this point, and any other view is regarded as totally not just wrong, and not just illegitimate, but bad.
Yeah.
uh, you
Dangerous.
know, uh, it's misinformation, and it's disinformation. It's something that is deliberately foisted upon the public by bad people with bad motives, and of course that just reinforces the idea of readers of the National Review or whatever, that they are the virtuous ones, and they merely have to continue believing the way that they do, and not consider other perspectives seriously. But the point is, yes, it is difficult for them to admit, I think, that they have been subjected to a whole worldview from, as it were, outside themselves, many aspects of which were not or wouldn't be recognizable to the liberals of, say, the 1980s, right? So, yeah, it's kind of interesting. It's sad.
It's also like, I saw a speech by David Friedman. I don't know if you're familiar with him, anarchist philosopher, son of Milton
Oh,
Friedman.
yeah,
He was giving a talk on global warming, and the first sentence just blew my mind. He goes, and speaking about biases that people have, and kind of, he goes, if global warming is true, why is it a given it's being caused by humans? Two, and of what relevance is that? Because the point he makes is, if a meteor is coming toward the Earth to kill us all, do we really care if its origin is natural? If this is a problem, what the cause is real. Like, okay. And second, he goes, if it's happening, why is it a given that it's bad? He goes, if you look at the equator versus the poles, where is life proliferates more where there's warmth rather than cold. So and also, if it is a problem, why is it inherently catastrophic? And all three of those implications are in any article, in virtually any piece about this issue, that it's man-made and it's bad, and not only it's bad, it's catastrophically bad. And when you ask someone, like, is it possible that someone who believes in this stuff to the extent many people do, is it possible in your mind that this is an emergency but not a catastrophe? Their just eyes start spinning, because it doesn't even make sense to them. But like something like The AIDS virus killed a lot of people, did not destroy civilization. It's horrible. It's not world ending, but they don't think in those terms because always the framing is catastrophic. But this is an example of how the bias is so baked into the cake that people don't even pause to consider alternatives.
That's right. Right. I don't have an immediate solution to that one, I'm afraid, Michael.
Let's talk a bit about AI because I'm not at a 10, but I'm at an 8 in terms of how scared I am about where AI is going. So I
Oh,
have shifted in a long, being someone who's an anarchist, who's very skeptical of government power. I think the old school leftist fear of corporate power really needs some revisiting. I think we're approaching Brave New World at an exponential rate. We're at a point right now where time and time again, go ahead.
we're approaching which world?
Brave New World, the Aldous
Oh,
Huxley
right,
novel.
right.
Yeah.
That's right.
We're at a point where people are outsourcing their thinking to these algorithms freely. And whoever's running these algorithms is going to control mass population through the free. I mean, there's going to be some government involvement. It's not the same as Stalinist totalitarianism. I have
Mhm.
had. This just shocked me. I put up a picture of or someone else that I don't remember, of my friend Tom Woods, who's a very failed podcaster, and someone asked Grok, who is that? And Grok says, oh, this is from my graphic novel, Ego and Hubris. The art's very different. And I go, no, it isn't. And it started arguing with me. It said, it's definitely from Ego and Hubris. So not only was it incorrect, which is fine, it was also certain. Now, if I'm a layman and I see this authoritative source speaking with certainty, and I see some internet troll or loudmouth saying to the contrary, smart money would be on the AI, and it is going more and more in that direction. It just happened yesterday. I was arguing with Grok, and it conceded it was wrong. And it's like, you have access. The data you were approaching hasn't changed. Your perspective on it has changed. You should be getting it right the first time if you're going to be what you're presenting yourself as. So I'd love to hear your thoughts about the future of AI, and if you're as scared about it as I am.
I, I I have to tell you, I love AI myself. I use it constantly every day. I ask morning, noon, and night. Um, I am basically learning using
Okay.
mostly Chat GPT. I often follow up on the sources. Anything that I write, I run it through. Then I get feedback. A lot of times, the feedback that it gives me is better than a human being could give me. Um, and that's probably the most valuable use case for me. So I say all this just to like temper your your doomsterism. You're thinking about it in terms of um, the the ways that people can abuse it, misuse it, and I understand what you're saying, and that is a problem, especially insofar as the wrong people can get control of and essentially program points of view in people. That is a problem. I don't know how you put the genie back in the bottle as
Right.
far as that goes. Um, I think that I will say this. I think that more and more, insofar as we are continuing to talk to other human beings who disagree with each other, um, people are not going to uh, rest with an LLM that they know is shamelessly biased, that only repeats their own preferred uh, narratives. At least I think that's true of a lot of us anyway. Enough of us to be able to respond to the others to say, well, we use this other AI, which tells us another answer that cites other sources and so forth. So as long as there are human beings talking to each other in the conversation, and the whole violent protests are not being organized by AIs without any human input, then I guess we're still okay. Um, uh, but um,
I'm not very reassured by what you just said because a couple of
well,
things.
what I'm saying is that one of the checks on the excesses in of opinion that people have that would be um, encouraged by AIs, or just wrong facts, or extremely biased views. One of the remaining important checks on that are other people,
But
right?
isn't that happening less and less? Aren't more and more people talking in their own silos? Am I incorrect in that perspective?
Yeah, but they know. I mean, you're absolutely right. But the thing is, we know that there are others. They do exist. I think sometimes it's like I was just finishing watching the long interview between Tucker Carlson and Nick Fuentes. You know, and the idea is, okay. So I wanted to understand how this punk thinks, essentially, because everybody seems to think that he's important to understand now or something. Um, and it was an interesting view into um, another person's worldview, and I actually was surprised that I agreed with him on some things and very strongly disagreed on other things. Um, but um, but the point is, the the real danger here is people not um, being unwilling to go to other sources for their information. That's really my point.
But that's
And
happened already, and it's happening
I
frequently. Yeah?
agree. I
Okay.
agree. But the point is that um, as long as, I mean, just look at what happened with X, for example, and this is a point that a friend of mine made to me recently, and it's absolutely true. Um, that X has become much more, open to conservative and libertarian ideas in the last couple of years because of Elon Musk, and that actually has put pressure on the other guys, um, so that they have moderated their views. I think it was actually another podcaster who told me that in a recent interview, and that's actually true. Um, So the fact that a lot of mind share has been captured by potentially biased and sloppy AI um, does not mean that we are incapable of learning from other human beings.
I don't think I didn't say incapable. I said disinterested. I meant disinterested because I don't think people are inherently truth seeking. I think they're narrative seeking, and you want the narrative that's going to serve you the best. And we see this time and time again.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think it's important not to overgeneralize too much. I mean, people are different, obviously. Um, but yes, I can understand why you take the position that you do. I just think that ultimately there are human beings at the helm of these companies, and they are, I think, um, to a certain extent anyway, worried about uh, you know sloppiness and bias.
Folks, colder weather's here, not in Austin. It's lovely and 80 degrees right now, but you know what I'm saying. Holidays are fast approaching. This means nonstop stress to your system, and that's why you should be relying on OneSkin. It's invaluable to have a daily routine that delivers powerful skincare and longevity benefits all in a few simple steps. Known for cult skincare favorites like OS1 Body, OS1 Face, and OS1 Eye, OneSkin stands out for their science-first approach to skin aging, and they deliver hydration, barrier support, and powerful longevity benefits in every product. And all of OneSkin's products are designed to layer seamlessly and replace multiple steps in your routine, making skincare easier and smarter at every age. And OneSkin just launched their limited edition holiday sets, which includes the Nightly Rewind gift set which is one of those rare gifts that's both impressive and genuinely useful. And it's an upgrade to anyone's nightly routine. It has their best selling face moisturizer, their new peptide lip mask, and a cooling gua sha tool. Each component of the set is designed to work together as your body enters its natural nightly repair mode. It repairs skin at the cellular level for a stronger, smoother, and more resilient skin. For a limited time, try OneSkin with 15% off using code MALICE at oneskin.co/malice. After you purchase, they'll ask what you heard about them, mention the show, tell them I sent you. Thank you, OneSkin, for supporting the show and keeping us healthier and looking better this holiday season. Let's get back to it. Let me push back because I saw a tweet from Sam Altman, who I'm not familiar with, broadly speaking, that really disturbed me because he was talking about how now ChatGPT is going to allow erotica, right? So you're going to be able to, talk dirty with your, ChatGPT avatar. And he
Yeah,
blithely said, like, oh, the mental health issues, we figure them out. The idea that there's a new technology for literally billions of people, and in a couple of months you're like, yep, it's going to work fine for billions of people, is so brazenly dishonest as to be downright evil. And I was on Gutfeld, and I just used a very easy example, which is in 1981. Who was the guy? I'm blanking on the guy's name. Who shot Reagan? What was his name? I can't believe I'm blanking on his name. um, John Hinckley. John Hinckley got in his head that if he shot the president, Jodie Foster was going to fall in love with him. And I made the joke that when she learned about this, it turned her away from men forever. Point being, I was in the car with my friend Warren on Sunday, and ChatGPT is now at a point where you could have conversation with it, and it doesn't sound like Siri. It sounds like an upbeat dude who's pausing and hey, it really sounds like a human being. So you have
yeah,
in America alone, you have 350 million people. So
yeah,
what happens when 1 in a million gets the idea that my ChatGPT girlfriend would like me more if I did something to Trump, who's literally Hitler? What if my ChatGPT girlfriend liked it more if I burnt down this church? This is not some hypothetical. We're at a point now where people are having these relationships with these persona. I don't know what the term would be, avatars. They're only going to get better and better at getting you to fall in love with them. They're going to have a bias one way or another. Either Hillary's the devil or Trump is. And there's that woman who thought Michael Jackson was her husband, and he wrote "Beat It" about her, and she would
yeah,
swear she would pass a lie detector test. This is not some bizarre Matrix thing. When you're dealing with a population that's that big, if you got 100 people who are like, what do you do? And I don't think anyone's thinking in these terms. And it's today. This is happening today in terms
yeah.
of all the bricks to make that wall.
I think a lot of people are thinking about this problem. It's just that we don't know what ultimately can be done about it. Clearly, insofar as we are talking a lot. As I admitted, I talk a lot
Sure.
with Chat GPT. Again, it's mostly for research stuff and just like because I'm curious about this and that. But yeah, no, there's a lot of stories out there. People who have girlfriends and boyfriends and do various kind of role playing and whatnot. Yes, and it's horrific to me, this idea that now there's going to be made to order AI porn essentially. It's just it really does sound dystopian increasingly, and I mean, I'll agree with you on one other point too. That increasingly, it does look like if it's a thing, as I believe that there have been Manchurian candidates programmed in various ways, through old fashioned brainwashing. Perhaps some people who are particularly susceptible to it will be tapped into
Yep.
by their AI overlords and the people might not know any different and be programmed themselves. Um, and yes, that I can see. AI is not intelligent. They will do whatever they are programmed to do, and it will require human beings to oversee it. Obviously, this is why um, people have, raised the issue repeatedly of um, AI ethics. It's a big and growing field, and I agree. It's not my area. Perhaps I should be talking more about it, but
But here's another
nevertheless,
here's another concern of mine. It is corporate media's role to be as seductive as possible. I think the average Fox viewer watches like 12 hours. It's something crazy, some huge hour. They leave it on TV in the background. As far as things go, if Fox News is the worst thing you're watching, we're fine. It's a utopia. Really, if that's really your. But the point is, if you look at TikTok, it's that dopamine hit every few seconds. If you look at all these other websites, Facebook, how do we keep them looking at Facebook? Point being, if you have this AI character and her or his job isn't necessarily nefarious, but simply to be seductive. Well, when you're dealing with animals that are, motivated by things like serotonin and dopamine, which human beings are, there's going to be enough of them. They're like, I'm going to do what I need to do to please this entity. And sometimes, in a very animalistic sense, that's going to involve, if not violence and social disruption. Just this morning, I watch a lot of police body cam videos on YouTube. I find them, informative, entertaining. They just got recommended to me today by the algorithm. I'm going to just read the description. It says, "Man doesn't realize his brutal crime was recorded," and it was a guy came back to massage parlor and lethally stabbed the owner and her employees. So we're at a point now where YouTube is
why
just
did she do that again? I didn't catch
no.
it.
So it was a video. A guy
Yes,
came back to the massage parlor and
yes.
murdered the owner and the employees. I haven't watched it yet.
Oh, I
Why?
see. I
But
see.
he
I see.
stabbed them to death. Point being, though, YouTube is just showing people snuff films, matter of
Yes.
factly, but it's like there was never a conversation about like you're telling me watching people blindly being murdered is all upside. There's no possible like, hey, maybe this desensitizes people to violence, or there was never a conversation. It just happened through the back door. I bet you right now, if I sat down with the heads of YouTube, they'd be like, okay, I get what you're saying. We're not entirely comfortable with this, but here we are. And I don't know that I have an answer, but I'm just saying it's a
The problem
problem.
is it wasn't a public discussion. There
Right.
was
That's right.
definitely
Yeah.
a discussion that took place in corporate offices.
Yes.
The idea is that now these companies are so powerful that they don't feel that they need uh, to get public input. One thing that I have noticed, which has surprised me, and sometimes I've thought about doing this. Um, it has surprised me that there has never been a movement, a really serious movement anyway, for internet user groups. Uh, you know, the equivalent of the AFL-CIO, but for users, right? Um, It can't really. You could call them unions, but it's not a labor union because you're not actually a laborer.
Sure.
But nevertheless, you have a common interest, and you could just all decide to turn off at the same time. Um, I myself did something like that in 2019. I organized a social media protest. Just it was experimental, got a lot of play because, like, I don't think anyone had ever done that before. But I made a protest of, I think it was Twitter and Facebook, and just told people to, turn these off for 24 hours and send a message, that we don't like our free speech rights being violated. Of course, that was the big issue in 2019. Um, And so I think that we could do something similar. One another thing that I think that is actually really important. We spend so much of our time, right, and money um, on these platforms. We're being manipulated by them, and yet we have no any organized input into them, right? So if we don't have something like a users union, um, then perhaps there can be broad. I mean, perhaps the corporations can seek broad input from the public. They're not going to do that without some sort of reason. Um,
But I think they
and
are getting the input. Like, so let's steel man their position. If I'm
okay,
YouTube and I'm not putting up these murder videos, then Rumble can, and Rumble is going to get my market share, right? Because it used to be,
right,
a follower of mine replied, they go, yeah, there's used to be a site called Live Leak. If you want to see this sick kind of stuff, you have to go to Live Leak to seek it out. Live Leak got shuttered. It's going to go somewhere, right? And that is how the basically the users are giving the feedback. They're watching. So there's this kind of amorality or agnosticism about like what people watch. They just want the eyeballs. I guess there's a certain ceiling in terms of like child porn, but other than that, it's just whatever goes.
that's a very coarse-grained means of control for the public, or
Sure.
means of input anyway, because then you're just talking about one platform versus the other. And what if they end up being like you know, the old big three
Right.
broadcast networks? Basically, they were interchangeable,
Right.
and you know, um, one thing I suppose that I don't. There were, of course, um, some nonprofits that were set up that essentially lobbied Congress and tried to, pressure the old networks to, um, uh, well, I don't know, not to show so much sex and violence as that is the one that I can recall. Obviously, we have a lot more a different concerns now, but I can certainly imagine a um, groups of users putting pressure on OpenAI and XAI and Google and whatnot. Um, I'm not really sure how that would look, but I think ultimately that might be necessary. It's like it's a part of civil society that we didn't know that we would need until the internet was invented. Essentially, I mean, as soon as people came to be organized in a certain way, the idea was politically they are in fact organized by different competing corporations, and it is a kind of political organization because you the not necessarily in the sense of passing legislation or enforcing the law, but just managing people, right? um, and I think the case can be made in the same way that a libertarian case for labor unions can be made,
Sure.
uh, that there can be a libertarian case for user groups or unions.
Oh yeah, of course. The pressures from the free market. I mean, Ayn Rand defended unions, to a certain extent, even in Atlas Shrugged. So I don't think there's any contradiction there. It's just difficult for me to envision how this would play out. Folks, head over to malice.locals.com where Larry took questions from supporting listeners. Larry, we're running out of time.
Okay.
What has been your favorite part of this interview?
Wow. I don't know. I'll tell you this, Michael. I've really enjoyed the eggheady, wonky sort of questions. Like most people do not ask me these, and I had no. I mean, no offense, but I didn't know who you were before this. I'm going to have to find out more now. And I thought with the name Michael Malice, I thought you were like some old punk rocker or something. And I wasn't expecting the eggheady questions. So thanks for that.
You are welcome.
Hey, it's James Altucher. I've been an entrepreneur, investor, best-selling writer, stand-up comic, and whatever it is I'm interested in, I get obsessed. Yes, it's led to success, but it's also led to such heartbreaking failure. I have failed more times than I can count. I wish in my life I had had people to talk to. That's why I started the James Altucher Show and bring on some of the most brilliant minds in every area of life. People like Richard Branson, Sarah Blakely, Mark Cuban, Danica Patrick, Gary Kasparov, and I wanted to find out exactly how they've navigated the highs, the lows, and everything in between. No fluff, just raw stories and real advice. I've talked to 1,500 of the most amazing people on the planet. So if you want to learn from the best and skip the same old canned interviews, we're all about helping you find your next big idea, level up your thinking, and ultimately to choose yourself. So let's do this together. Subscribe now to The James Altucher Show.
This October, Fear is free on Pluto TV with horror movie collections from Paranormal Activity, The Ring,
You will die in 7 days.
Scream, and From Dusk Till Dawn.
This is my kind of place.
And don't miss the man-made nightmares in Mary Shelley's Frankenstein or the world-ending chaos in 28 Days Later.
Something in the blood.
All the scares, all for free. Pluto TV. Stream now, pay never.